Sawaf was in custody after police suspected he rigged trail cameras with explosives in Harlan County.
He never showed any sign of irritation.
The heart of creation.
We're told Sawaf was out with law enforcement agents last Thursday in Harlan County.
He took Nancy under his wing and just took care of her and would have done anything for her.
Can you do?
An altercation took place, and at which time deadly force was utilized.
And I just loved him. I really, really will miss him a lot.
On August 11th, 2016, the small town of Putney was beginning to settle into its late evening, as many were coming home from another grueling shift at the local coal mine. But parked on Red Dog Road were two patrol cars that gave indication to the residents that something wasn't right. Within only a matter of minutes, the tranquility of this rural community was shattered when a single gunshot tore through the woodland and brought shock to this sleepy little town. This is the strange story of Mark Sawaf, also known as the Trailcam Bomber. About 8 miles north of the small city of Harlan, many of the residents of Putney continue to labor away in the deep coal mines, striving to provide for their families each day beneath the dirt. The sound of the passing coal train cutting its way through the valley is a constant reminder of their hard work, but many of the residents simply cannot deny there is nowhere else on this earth they'd rather be. This is precisely how Aaron No felt about the county as he stood at the end of Red Dog Road, taking in Kentucky's magnificent scenery. He could think of no better idea than taking in the stunning sights of the rural landscape, getting lost in the earthy aroma of laurel, and spending some time alone with his thoughts on a little unofficial route that was rarely used by the general public. The walk began normally, with the sun's rays piercing through the oak and holly, but after just a short while, he noticed something. A trail cam with a camouflage pattern was mounted on a tree close to the path that had been frequently used by ATVs. This wasn't an unusual sight to see due to how common hunting is in the area and the trail cam's proximity to a mountainous property. Aaron thought perhaps the residents were merely monitoring the area's local wildlife. However, when he decided to check it more closely, he found that not only was its power source missing, but the SD card had also been taken out. Even though to his eyes it was in perfect condition, he concluded that it must have been abandoned for being damaged in some way. To his surprise, he located a second camera just a few feet away on another tree. So he decided to pocket both items and continue hiking, until eventually he returned to his car as the sun was setting and the peaceful day was coming to an end. It was at this point that Aaron phoned his friend, Dustin Hall, to discuss the trail cams and ask if his friend had any spare parts to maybe repair the cameras. Dustin agreed to look at the devices and set to work once Aaron had dropped them off. The young man began to tinker with the cameras in his workshop and also came to the same conclusion that the overall condition of the trail cams indicated that they were brand new. They did feel a bit lighter than their regular models, but for all he knew, it was merely a new ergonomic design. After inserting a new SD card, Dustin decided that he needed to test whether the trail cams could actually be powered, since this may be the problem. But after retrieving a few batteries and inserting them into the device, a blinding white light filled the room, and Dustin was thrown onto his back. Covered in blood, with serious burns and cuts all over his chest, he was horrified to see that his hand was now mangled, and the device had exploded. When Dustin regained consciousness, he found himself in hospital covered in bandages and in excruciating pain. How he managed to get himself the medical attention he so desperately required is unclear, but he was now thankfully on the road to recovery. Despite his pain, Dustin was determined to speak with the authorities and gave a statement mentioning how his friend Aaron came across the cameras. An ATF explosive expert was sent to Dustin's residence and discovered that the second camera contained an explosive device hidden within its casing. A 9mm Winchester brand shell was filled with an unknown explosive substance and had been bonded with hot glue. It also contained a green hobby fuse that was coming out of the casing and was connected to what experts believed was an electrically powered pyrotechnic switch. After a short interview with Dustin, the authorities were initially suspicious that maybe Aaron had something to do with the devices. However, after looking around the area where the cameras were discovered, they came across the owner of the mountain property, Joseph Bennett, and his friend, Kevin Jump. When questioned if they had noticed anyone odd putting cameras around the property, the two men pointed to a man named Mark Sawaf. According to Joseph, he had spotted Sawaf putting cameras around the area during the previous month, and after approaching him and telling him he didn't have authorization to use the land for hunting, he assumed the problem was resolved. However, just a week later, Joseph's friend Kevin found even more cameras in the same area, one of which contained a photo of Mark. The authorities even interviewed a trooper cadet named Will Pope, who stated that he also discovered 4 or 5 trail cams belonging to Sawaf, many of which had Mark's initials etched into them. However, after taking the cameras, Pope was horrified to find a few days later that his deer stand had been vandalized, and by the looks of the tree bark surrounding it, it had been blown off the stand. When the investigating officers heard the name Sawaf, they remembered it from a few years before. Ali Sawaf, Mark's father, was a local doctor who specialized in urology. In the early 2000s, he had volunteered to quit his practice at the Daniel Boone Clinic in Harlan to establish his own practice in the same city. When he first started out on his own, he borrowed an office from his friend, Dr. Alan Freed, to use on weekends. But after only 2 weekends, Dr. Freed asked Ali Sawaf to vacate the property because the in-office pharmacy was losing massive amounts of controlled substances. It was later stated in court documents that Dr. Sawaf was allegedly filling out prescriptions to patients at an unbelievable scale after he had given them an intense examination, which only included making them wear a blood pressure cuff. The substance he was apparently distributing so willingly was Oxycontin. But what of his son, Mark? Well, this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. This is where you'd expect Mark Sawaf, if he were in fact the Trailcam Bomber, to be a recluse. Someone with maybe extreme views and a deep hatred for society, an almost Ted Kaczynski or Luke Helder type figure. In reality, authorities learned that Mark Sawaf was a very accomplished mental health practitioner with a master's degree in counseling and even owned his own clinic. According to those close to him, he was extremely kind and compassionate, especially when it came to assisting those coping with substance abuse and mental health concerns, which is ironic given that Mark's father was discovered prescribing a medicine that drives many people into heroin addiction. Regardless, all evidence pointed to Mark Sawaf as the primary suspect in the Trailcam Bomber case at the time. On June 21st, the local police brought a search warrant to Sawaf's residence and performed an examination of his property with ATF agents present. As you would expect, Mark wasn't exactly thrilled with the situation, but before long, the evidence soon began to pile. They uncovered 6 trail cameras in various levels of modification, as well as a modified shotgun shell filled with an explosive substance and had been sealed with hot glue. They also found the hot glue gun, copper wire, wire cutters and orange insulator, the same sort discovered in Dustin Hall's basement, a plastic jug holding a black powder that was later identified as ammonium nitrate, a pan containing about 3 pounds of the substance, and 2 5-pound bags also containing the mixture. More disturbingly, they discovered a handwritten note showing the breakdowns of various explosive mixtures, as well as another note taken from the trash that stated, "A broken camera for a broken soul." Mark was charged and detained while the investigation was still ongoing, and the Kentucky State Police issued a public warning to avoid any trail cameras in Harlan County's woodland areas, with the advice to notify the local police if any suspicious cameras were located. At least 12 other explosive devices were found in the area after further investigation, but more interestingly, there were 2 other accounts of people being hurt by the explosives and some devices being armed with tripwires. However, it should be noted, I was unable to verify these accounts. During the interview process, Mark claimed that he was producing explosive targets comparable to the brand of tannerite. As the name implies, these targets explode when hit with a high-velocity round and are commonly used by firearm enthusiasts and avid hunters, of which Mark was one. But when questioned about the hot glue gun, the trail cameras in various states of disrepair and modification, and the chilling note, he stated he didn't have an answer. As detectives applied pressure, he admitted that he had previously written the note sometime in the past and intended to leave it in one of the broken trail cameras for a thief to steal, even claiming that he only ever put firecrackers in his cameras to give any potential thieves a shock. But as Dustin Hall could argue, the mixture provided more than just a shock. After some convincing, Mark agreed to take Lieutenant Matt Greathouse, a member of the Hazardous Devices Unit, and fire investigator Captain Brad Dobrzinski, back into the Kentucky woods to retrieve the rest of the explosives. It should also be noted that ATF Special Agent Todd Tremaine was also present at some point during the excursion. On August 11th, he was transferred out of detention, placed in the back of a patrol car, and driven to Red Dog Road. It should be known that Mark's wrists were shackled, with some sources even stating they were shackled to his waist. After arriving at their destination, the authorities spent most of the day with Mark identifying the remaining cameras, but as the day was coming to an end, they decided to continue the search the next day. Mark had other plans. Some sources state Mark tried to escape custody and make a getaway. However, according to Greathouse, there was a struggle between him and the suspect. Fearing for his life as he believed Sawaf was attempting to grab his firearm, he yelled to Dobrzinski to shoot the suspect. Brad pulled out his service weapon, aimed, and pulled the trigger. The round hit Mark in the back of the head, but this is where the details really start to get muddy. After the death of Mark, his father Ali Sawaf filed a complaint against the officers, claiming that his son was murdered. The complaint itself claimed the following: Dobrozinski shot Mark Sawaf in the back of the head from a distance of 4 to 5 feet while he was handcuffed and chained. Dobrozinski had been working an extremely long shift, moving into around 30 hours, and neither officers attempted to render aid to Mark Sawaf for approximately 20 minutes as he clung to life and struggled to breathe. When an ATF medic arrived on scene at approximately 7:05 p.m. and began performing life-saving measures, it was too late, as Mark died 55 minutes later. More disturbingly, the complaint further states that Dobrozinski took photos of the scene, apparently taking shots of Greathouse striking different poses with the body immediately after the shooting, and later deliberately concealed the fact he had taken photos. How much of the complaint is true, sadly, we will never know. Nor will we know what led Mark Sawaf to place these trail cameras around the area, nor his mental state. The two officers were eventually put on paid leave after the August 11th incident. Mark's ex-girlfriend's mother even came forward expressing how kind and compassionate he was, and what happened on August 11th was a tragedy.
I knew him for 9 years. He was like a son to me. He was so good to me, to my husband, to my both daughters. He loved to talk to me about psychology. He loved to talk about his outlook on life and how positive he was that things will work out. He never showed any sign of irritation because he was so calm with us. He would often calm me down because I tend to get a little upset over certain things. He'd say, "No, Leslie, this is okay. It'll work out." And I just loved him. I really, really will miss him a lot.
Ali Sawaf would also appear on the local news, expressing his confusion at how his son ended up losing his life that day.
Now, the question raised by some, including Sawaf's father shortly after, was since he was in custody, how was he able to create that altercation?
Well, how can he run away when he's shackled with his hand? Even when he went with them walking the ground, when he went to the restaurant, he was shackled.
I've also put the court documents in the description below, as there is far too much for me to cover in this video. I'd be interested to see how you interpret the events of August 11th, as this case I found utterly fascinating, and I've done my best to portray it as accurately as I can. As a side note, if you wish to see this video in full color, please consider joining my Patreon. You'll also gain access to these videos at a much earlier rate compared to when they are put up on YouTube, plus behind the scenes. We also have a Discord community where we discuss upcoming cases I'll be covering, and it's also a great place to put suggestions for any cases you think I should cover. The next video I will be covering will be part 2 of the 8 Immortals restaurant murders. From now on, I'll be going back and forth between longer cases such as this one, and others where I can break them down into smaller parts, such as 8 Immortals and the legend of the Yoshiwara Slash. Thank you all so much for your continued patience, and of course for watching. I am only a one-man team when it comes to making these videos, as I have to do the artwork, research and narration and editing all by myself, but the truth is, I absolutely adore it. If you like this video and wish to see more, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing and hitting the bell notification, something I've never actually asked before, as I've noticed many of you aren't subscribed, so getting your feedback would be greatly appreciated. I hope to see you all again soon. You've been watching Beyond the Dark.